So growing up in Zimbabwe, I was bullied at school constantly, nearly every single day. I never told anybody about that. So my experience at school was horrible. I did not feel safe. I just thought that one day I'm really going to get seriously assaulted by one of the students. Secondly, people kept on calling me gay, a fag, and I was like, I was very soft-spoken. I can be soft-spoken, and that is really dangerous because in Zimbabwe, it's illegal to be gay. And though at that time, I did not know that I was gay, I knew I was different, but I didn't really have the language for it. So I just did not feel safe because I was different to begin with, but also my peers were reconfirming that I was different. For me, I just felt trapped in this situation where if I'm fully to be myself, it's going to be dangerous because people may then think that I'm gay and then I'm going to go to jail or I'm going to get abandoned by my family. Because I felt this way, I had no future in Zimbabwe. And so I was going to do whatever it took to find an opportunity or create an opportunity to get out. I decided to go overseas because I felt trapped in my home country in Zimbabwe. And inside of the people I was spending time with at church, it always seemed that going overseas was like the ultimate opportunity. People would go overseas to study at university and then be able to support their family. We had family friends who had children overseas who were way older than I was, and they just seemed to have a different life, a life full of abundance, a life full of resources. That was not necessarily my family. And even though my family did not have the resources, for me, going overseas was the ultimate opportunity. Inside of creating the ultimate opportunity to go overseas, my brain would just keep on thinking about how I could make this happen. Because definitely my family could not afford for me to go overseas. So I spent a lot of time dreaming about how I could make this happen. And so I would dream about how could I go to the United Kingdom, but I just couldn't see any possible pathway there. And then it kind of dawned on me that I could actually ask some of our Australian friends, the people who had come as volunteers and spent time in our home where we'd formed a really close connection. And so I felt comfortable with the thought of asking Andrew Gaskell if I could come to Australia. So I spent lots of time and days and weeks and months, if not years, dreaming about asking Andrew. I dreamt about him saying yes to me and how I'd feel. I dreamt about him saying no to me and how crushed I'd be. My brain would go from courage to ask to fear of asking. And another part to that was then also the fear of people getting in my way if I were to ask, including my parents. I didn't know how my parents would respond. So I was completely terrified of people getting in my way of me pursuing this ultimate opportunity. If my mom and dad said no, that meant that I couldn't ask anybody to go overseas. That would mean that I'd be stuck in Zimbabwe and have to follow the traditional path of finishing my high school, then going to university, and then who knows what. And I really did not see a future for myself in Zimbabwe, particularly with the desires and the dreams that were inside of me. They just didn't exist in Zimbabwe. The things that I read in the books did not exist in Zimbabwe, but they did exist overseas. So I was definitely so scared about people getting in my way. So I kept it all a secret. And then I would daydream about asking Andrew and the hope, the different life that I would have, the feeling I would have. And then I'd also daydream about him saying no. That's more like a nightmare. And feeling completely crushed and suffocated, meaning that I would just have to continue going through life, through the education system, doing as I'm told to do and be compliant without me or without there being a space to be me. That sounded horrible and suffocating, and I just couldn't. I just had to take this opportunity and create it. After several months and months of daydreaming, let's call it a year, I then said to myself, next time Andrew is in Zimbabwe, I am going to ask him if I can come to Australia to study. I decided that I was going to do that. And when I heard that he was planning another trip and he was going to come to our home with other Australians, I was so excited. I kept on asking Mom and Dad, when is he coming to Zimbabwe? When is he coming to Zimbabwe? I actually kind of pestered them, and they kept on saying, we don't really know, he's going to give us more information, you know. And anytime the phone rang in the house and it was Andrew, I'd say, when do you know when he's coming? Can you ask him? Because I typically didn't have telephone conversations with him. Finally, we discovered when he was coming. I cannot remember the month anymore. The morning I knew Andrew was going to be coming to our home, I woke up so excited. I took a bath, chose my best clothes to wear, which is a t-shirt and shorts in bright colors as usual, combed my hair. I was going to be squeaky clean and ask Andrew if I could come to Australia. And then I played in my mind exactly what I was going to say. I was going to say something along the lines of, Andrew, I'd like to come to Australia to study. I'd like to become a forensic scientist or a lawyer. I think that having an education in Australia will make me a better person, and then I can use my skills back in Zimbabwe and create a better life for myself and my family. I had it all figured out in my mind, and I just kept on replaying the conversation over and over and over and over again so that I could get it perfect, so that he could hear me. And I was completely, scared of this conversation. I'd have emotions of Andrew not having time to listen to me. So I was like, how am I going to actually get him to listen to me? I'm just 14 years old. I'm a child, He won't make time. He's going to be talking to the adults. So it's like, how am I going to do that? And I thought to myself, I'll ask to see him and he'll come into my room and then we'll sit down and I can talk to him. And I'll have 5 minutes to convey that to him. And then I also imagined it's like him saying, yes, you can definitely come to Australia. And me being full of happiness and joy. I also imagined him saying, I can't do that. And me being so crushed. The thought of Andrew saying no was equivalent to saying I have no life, because this was the ultimate opportunity for me. It meant that I would have to go through life pretending to fit in, pretending that I was somebody I was not, pretending that everything was fine like I had already done. And I just could not bear it. It was just too heartbreaking. I have no words. On the day that Andrew arrives, a big van arrives to our home and we're all excited. We had cleaned the home, it's squeaky clean as well. My mom and dad get out of the house to open the gate. My brother comes out as well. I get out, I'm on the veranda looking, and all these white people are starting to disembark from the van. And I'm looking for Andrew, two people come out and I'm looking for Andrew. Andrew wasn't there. More people come out. Andrew wasn't there. About half the van is now empty and Andrew's still not there. The last person disembarks and Andrew is not there. When I realized that Andrew wasn't there, my heart sank. I was so disappointed. I felt like my whole life was literally crashing into me because this opportunity that I had invested all my hopes and dreams crashed. And I felt so stuck in that moment. So I did what I did. I put a smile on, socialized, introduced myself to the guests, greeted Janine. Then I went into my room. And in my room, I just was like, what am I going to do? I now have no future. Literally, I have no future now. I'm going to be stuck here in Zimbabwe and I'm now going to have to follow the trodden path. And my life is going to be a living hell because I now have to pretend to be somebody I'm not. The reason why Andrew did not show up was that he actually had to stay back in Australia to continue running the business on other business matters, while Janine was the one who decided to come this time around as it was her turn to do the African trip. So that's why Andrew did not show up. It dawned on me that I could write a letter to Andrew, and I had to do it then and there because Janine was going to leave, and it dawned on me that I could write this letter, give it to Janine, and then Janine could give it to Andrew. But I had to do it then and there because that was the only opportunity, because afterwards Janine and the rest of the tourists would have left. So I sat at my desk and I started writing, and I crumpled it up. I wasn't happy with it. Threw it away. Started writing another one, crumpled it up. I don't know how many more I went through that, but then I was like, I have to do this and I have to get it done. This is my only opportunity to go overseas. Otherwise, it might never happen for me. That's what it was like for me. So I wrote this letter and I shared with him how I wanted to get an education that I would not have had in Zimbabwe, that I had dreams of potentially becoming a forensic scientist or a lawyer, and that I wanted to use the skills to give back to my home country, Zimbabwe, once I had that education. So I write all of this out, I put it in an envelope, address it to Andrew, and then I go looking for Janine. I can't quite find her. I'm thinking, oh no, has she already gone? Then I find her and I say to Janine, is it okay if I just talk to you in my bedroom? She says, yes. She comes into my bedroom and I just say to her, I've got this letter for Andrew. Can you please give this letter to Andrew? I give this letter to Janine and she takes it from me. And again, it's like all my hopes and dreams are in that letter and with this person. So now I have to trust that Janine is going to pass on my letter to Andrew. That was scary because I had to trust somebody else to be my intermediary now and not have that direct conversation with Andrew. I waited for Andrew's response. 1 month went by and there was nothing. I was disappointed. I was wondering if Janine even had given Andrew the letter. I started questioning whether she actually had done what she said she was going to do. During this period of time, I was still going to school. I was doing my year 8, which was at that time Form 2 and the ZJC. So we had national exams during this time. So I was studying for those national exams. And nobody knew I'd written this letter. Nobody. No friend, no acquaintance, no family. Nobody knew. The only person who knew that had a letter was Janine. And every day I'll check the letterbox to see if there was a response, and there was nothing. I even remember during that time that there had been discussions about me going to boarding school for my Form 3, which is my year 9. And the headmaster had actually finally said yes to that. And I said, no, I don't want to go to boarding school. And my dad couldn't understand why I changed my mind. But I thought to myself, If I go to boarding school, that means I won't be at home to either receive a letter or work on my plan to go to Australia. So I created space for this opportunity, but I didn't know whether it was actually going to happen or not. So I literally had everything riding on it. I was already making future decisions about my life in Zimbabwe based on something I had no idea was going to happen. A month and a half goes by, nothing. 2 months go by, nothing. And it's crushing me. At this time, I'm now even becoming fearful because I'm now thinking that I've done something wrong, and now I'm going to be found out that I made this request to go to Australia and I really should have talked to mom and dad, and now Andrew's going to tell mom and dad what I've done and I'm going to be in trouble. So now I'm becoming fearful about not receiving any response. 2.5 months go by and the tension inside of me escalates. 3 months go by, still nothing. Then one day my dad comes home and says to me, "What's this about you going to Australia?" My heart starts racing. I don't know how to respond. I don't know if he is angry at me or whether he's excited. He's not really showing much emotion, but I just smile at him cheekily and I said to him, I wrote a letter to Andrew to ask if I could come to Australia. And then my dad looks at me with like joy in his eyes, saying that Andrew had said yes, why not? And I was so filled with joy that Andrew had said, why not? And he'd actually written out this long response, which I still have today. In the letter that Andrew writes back to me, he's like, yes, you can come to Australia, but we've got lots of hurdles ahead of us. We've got financial hurdles. We have to choose schools. We have to immigration hurdles. So there were a few hurdles that we had to overcome together. And the thing that was really interesting about Andrew's email was that though I was in a context in Zimbabwe where I came from a low middle class family, not much money, Andrew treated me like an adult. His email response was about me taking responsibility for the opportunity, not him giving something to me. And that was quite distinct. And I really remember feeling scared by that, because in his email as well, he was like, how am I going to be able to raise funds and resources for my opportunity to come to Australia? And in my mind, all I wanted to say was, don't you know how poor we are? That's impossible. And it wasn't that Andrew didn't know what our family situation was or what we were dealing with, but it was really about me also taking ownership of the responsibility and the ownership of the opportunity to come to Australia. When the news about me potentially going to Australia happened, my mom wasn't actually in the country. She was in Nigeria at that time doing HIV/AIDS prevention programs there. So she'd been away for a month, and I remember picking her up from the airport with my dad and explaining that I had this opportunity to go to Australia. At first, she was kind of lukewarm about it because she wanted more information. But once she realized that Andrew really was going to make it happen, she really got excited about the opportunity. Her son having an opportunity for a life better than the life he was having in Zimbabwe. So that was then the whole family involved in this whole exciting opportunity. There were a lot of things that needed to happen for me to get to Australia. The first one was just being able to go to school in Australia, finding a school that Andrew could afford to pay the fees. And so Andrew starts talking to different schools in Melbourne. Oxley College was one of the schools that he talked to. He talked to the state government schools. He talked to some private schools. The state schools required international students to pay upfront school fees, which was about $8,000 at that time. And that was going to be way too expensive for Andrew. And the state schools did not provide scholarships to international students. The opportunity to go to Oxley fell through. And I remember when Andrew told me about that, how crushed I was as well, because then it was like, we need to still find another school. And then Andrew went to a school called Kingswood College, which was literally a 15-minute walk from his home. And he explained my family situation, and they gave me a part scholarship. They had said that they'd never had a person from Zimbabwe at their school before, and this would be a great addition to their school community for awareness and exposure. And so Kingswood College gave me a part scholarship. So instead of paying $16,000 a year for school fees, they reduced that to $6,000 a year for my fees. And Andrew was willing to use his resources, his finance, to pay for my school fees for the next 2 years at Kingswood College, which completely transformed my life. And I remember when Andrew told me that Kingswood College had said yes, how full of joy I was. During this whole process, Andrew still insisted that I keep on looking for other ways to raise funds for myself, whether it was through the RACVA, other community groups. But everything I did was a dead end. The organizations and people just did not have that kind of resource. The thing that is really exceptional is that Andrew used his finances, his resources, for me to come to Australia. He himself being a business owner himself, a small business, 10-day travel. He had been working from 6 a.m. to midnight most days with breaks in between, running his own business. To then take on another responsibility was just moving. And it really, he really taught me what it's like to have somebody's back, irrespective of one's own personal circumstances. And for that, I will be forever grateful for the rest of my life. There were many hurdles coming to Australia. The other hurdle was immigration. So I then needed to apply for a student visa to come to Australia. So when I was 15 years old, Andrew did come to Zimbabwe, and he brought all the paperwork that was required for the immigration process to apply for the student visa. They required that there was a guardian. They required that there was also proof that I was going to be able to support myself in Australia. And Andrew provided all of that. He really put himself on the line for me without knowing whether I was going to actually win or get the result by coming to Australia or not. Now, I remember after finishing and completing those application forms, Andrew then took them to the embassy in Zimbabwe, the Australian embassy in Zimbabwe, and he was on getting a flight back to Australia. And when he arrived at the embassy, their visa section had actually closed. And Andrew was like, I really need you to take this application because I'm on my next flight. And they just started stonewalling him. And he just kept on having the conversation. And in the end, they accepted taking the application. Another thing I really learned from Andrew was not taking no as an answer, but keep on trying to find a way to keep on getting the outcome that you wanted. Because if they didn't take my visa application at that time, that means everything else was going to be delayed. After all, from the time Andrew said yes to me coming to Australia to the time of, finding a school, then finding and completing all the forms for immigration, that had been already a year. A year had gone by just to get to that point. I was 15, turning 16, and I wanted to start my year 11, which is, Form 5. So we just had less than a year to go. The visa application grant would take about 3 months or longer for it to be approved or denied. So fortunately, Andrew did fight for the embassy to take my application, which they did. Then the waiting game. It was the waiting game because now a school had said yes. We'd completed all the immigration forms. I'd done my medicals. And now we had to then find out whether they were actually going to grant it. It was at the pure discretion of an official at the embassy. That was scary. So I didn't know whether they were going to say yes or no. Nobody did, because my family circumstances were that we were poor and didn't have resources. So it was really building a case that I was going to be taken care of when I came to Australia. Another obstacle in getting to Australia was that I was actually stateless. I was born in the UK, and being born in the UK did not entitle me to British citizenship. And at that time, I got back into Zimbabwe on my mom's passport, but there was no pathway at that time for me to become a Zimbabwean citizen. And because I wasn't a Zimbabwean citizen, I didn't have a passport. So because I didn't have a passport, then I couldn't leave the country. So we had to find a way to get my Zimbabwean papers. And it started off with my mom and my dad having to go to the capital city in Harare to apply for my Zimbabwean birth certificate, which was then granted as a ex parte person, a person who was born overseas, and then which led to me being able to apply for a passport. So we didn't even know whether that was going to be granted because we just didn't know the process, because I was stateless for 15 years of my life. So the waiting game starts, where we're just waiting to see whether my visa is going to be granted by the Australian embassy or not. And then 3 months go by, we heard no news. Andrew's calling up my mom and my dad to see if that whether they can contact the embassy, because he hadn't received any response regarding my application either. So 3 months go by, and my heart is now getting heavy, and I am sure that they have denied my application because 3 months has passed. And then I remember getting an email, because now we have emails at this time when I'm around 15 years old, that my visa had been granted. And I am so full of joy. It's like I had this orange sticker in my passport granting me leave to come to Australia for 2 years to complete my year 11 and year 12. And finally, I have my gateway to the ultimate opportunity. It took me nearly 2 years from the time Andrew said yes till the time I left the country.